Do many
It's always
people? For some reason, I thought. Oh, sorry. I see we're live now. Talking about that.
no. Go ahead.
I thought you were talking about getting a group of guys to. I must totally misunderstood that.
We do typically get a bunch of guys, but I got another one coming here in a minute.
Hmm.
But I'm very interested in in yours, and I'll introduce you. This is Jason MacKenzie. So I got a pretty a substantial. This is Bill. Bill. This is
Hey, Bill.
Hey.
Jason. Bill
Good
asked some great
afternoon.
questions. Jason has a Substack, and he's one of the first ones I joined. And I'll tell you, I'm hooked. I read a lot of it. I don't comment a lot because it's a pretty emotional site actually,
Hmm.
and it's hard sometimes. I have commented a few times, and I appreciate the fact. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's important to get the word out there and let people know that it is appreciated, because I know it doesn't have to. It can't be easy for you. Some of the things you have to write, some of the things you have to say. I understand that.
Hmm.
That saying, I can't imagine it. But I'm coming from a point, where I grief not too long ago where I lost my father, and I'm not sure how old you are. And
52.
I'm 55, and
Hmm.
that was the first major loss of my life, and learning how to grieve and get through that and um, process that has been interesting, and I want you to know you've helped me. Um, your
I'm
site
glad.
it has helped me, um, and so you know if you're not if you're not one of Jason's subscribers, I would urge somebody to go out there and take a look at it, because it's a fascinating view at grief. Um, and I do have some questions. I'm not going to get real deep into it because I know it's an emotional topic, and the idea here is not to get all emotional. And I'll let Bill, because Bill comes up with some great questions.
Ooh. Oh,
Um,
we can talk about anything, man. It's
okay.
totally cool. Like everything's on the table.
Um, well, I'll ask you because I'm really curious, and there's not enough room in your blog to comment um, everything that I want to know. So I've read a lot of it and tried to catch up. But what problem in how men handle grief made you say enough, and I'm going to write a different playbook for it? Was it just your experience, or um, what
Yeah.
finally what what finally made you do that?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, part of it was my experience where, I lost my wife to suicide in 2010, and I grieved or didn't grieve, let's say, probably like a pretty traditional dude, man. Like I remember driving off the funeral home, off this cemetery property after the funeral, saying, "Okay, well that chapter's over. Time to move on. I got to build new life. Got all these things got to do. I got two kids to raise." And I literally thought it was like that. I mean, I thought I could compartmentalize it like that. And I also thought, and I really don't know, like nobody ever specifically sat down and said this to me, but so I don't know exactly, I guess it was just uh, accumulation of different inputs, but I just thought grief was for something like for weak people. Like, I mean, I'm weak people lay on the couch and cry. Strong people get shit done that needs to get done. And there's all kinds of things that need to get done. So I set about getting those things done. Again, finding, getting remarried, uh, moving to a new city, like just trying to start a new life. But I, I was drinking my face off. And I started drinking during my wife's mental health issues. So like the 5 years leading up to her death were just a nightmare of just a descending, like I basically watched her die for 5 years, and it was really horrible. And her, because of her mental health issues, her behavior was just this unbelievably erratic and destructive. So I started drinking uh, as a way of coping with that, because I didn't have any other. I wasn't going to talk to anybody about it. Like, I mean, so I didn't even it was like an intentional choice. I almost just like, I just started using booze to cope with it. And so after it was after my wife's death, I drank for my face off for almost 5 years. And and I finally stopped, I kind of hit like rock bottom or whatever. And that was about 11 years ago. And it was about 6 months after 6 months or so after I stopped drinking, I started having all these like really unfamiliar, like intense emotions, thoughts, crying about my wife, going to visit her grave more often. I started writing about her. And I remember saying to my wife now, her name's Tanya, I said, like, do you think this is I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like do you think this is weird that I'm like spending all this time writing about my dead first wife and stuff? And she's like, God, you're grieving, man. And I remember when she said that, it felt really true, but it never occurred to me that that was what was happening. And what I realized is that entire time I was drinking, all of the misery and like beating myself up and like wanting to quit and failing to quit and just all that stuff, it never one time crossed my mind that the drinking and my wife's mental health issues and suicide were related to it. Not a single time. So once that finally dawned on me, I was like, holy shit, man. I mean, I can't be the only, like, obviously, I can't be the only person. Like, I'm not a total idiot. I can't be the only person who's like laboring under this crazy notion of like, grief or moving on or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And so then, I mean, ultimately, I didn't want to write about I wasn't really I did all kinds of other stuff. My wife's death actually completely changed the trajectory of my life in a lot of ways. But then 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, my daughter, our 19-year-old daughter died and in a car accident. And her death was I, I you know, I mean, it's been as bad as my wife's mental health issues and suicide. My daughter's death is on another level of pain, I would say. Um, but But I think it was also because her death was so related to my wife's death in the sense that my wife's suicide, like, really shattered my daughter's soul, and she was never able to recover from it, and ultimately, she died in a drunk driving accident, but, like, she was driving drunk, but her mental health issues had just I mean, they it was like a nightmare version of Groundhog Day, like, and so I'm getting to the point of I'm getting to an answer here, sorry. And as I went through as after she died, I just became obsessed about grief. And I've had this really unique experience of like grieving like the quote normal way, the typical guy way, and then being able to try to apply all the things that I've learned, the vocabulary I have, the relationships I have with people, and like just to navigate this in a way where, not only do I not destroy myself and everybody that I love, but that I heal and that I continue to move forward. And I just, I've done a lot of writing and speaking and over the years, and I feel completely obsessed with the idea of transforming the face of men's grief. I mean, and I know I can do it. So, I mean, that's why I write about the things that I write about. And yeah, so I don't know I think that probably answered your question, but you asked it so long ago because I don't even remember what it was.
No, that's good, man. I mean, that's good. I mean, I understand like what you're saying. I mean, it's like I said, it's helped me reading your site to go through some of the practices and you're absolutely right. Men have trouble with grief and they have trouble processing grief. And I think women do to an extent too, but they're allowed to show more emotion than men,
Mm,
especially in a public setting. And um, I said it does, and grief will out eventually. It will come out eventually,
mhm,
um, in one way or another. And I think it is imperative that we choose the means in which we release that pressure. Um, Especially as men, because I remember when I was 7, my grandfather killed himself, and my dad drove for 6 hours with us in the back seat, never said a word
mm,
the entire trip, we pulled up in the driveway, and he turned around and told us that my papa was dead. That's the first time I saw my father cry.
Mm.
I was 7 years old, and he cried for like 45 seconds, a minute, and then we went inside, handled business, and that was not his fault,
Mhm.
but that was my lesson in grief, right? You know, that I gave myself a minute to clamp down, and then I had to go about business, like you said. Strong men get shit done, and weak guys sit around and cry, right? And it did work, and finally, it took about 20 years for that to come back, where I could finally sit down and cry about my papa.
Mm.
Because I loved the man, I missed him, but I just never grieved him,
Mhm.
and um, but, and it's a part of life that we deal with. Then I went to boot camp, and my grandmother died, and we told that story before. And then my dad died, and I did the same thing you did. I went down there. My mother was there, and I'm like, now I'm the man of the family, and I got business to handle. And everybody else was allowed that grief and to sit around, but I had things to do. And to this day, I still don't know that I've done it. And do you have anything, Bill, before I ask the next one?
Yeah, you guys can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, Jason, there were two resources that I came upon in 2020, right? So kind of the beginning of COVID. One of them was Modern Loss, which was a website that talked about loss, but in this more modern way. And it was almost like, for those of us that were searching for what you write about now, right? We were stumbling through trying to find resources that gave us permission to grieve. And I remember coming across Modern Loss and thinking, well, at least somebody's put words on the page that I can at least secretly
Mhm.
um, kind of stand nearby and say they've captured it. Now, I couldn't share it with anybody else. The other resource that I came across was an author and speaker named Francis Weller.
Mhm.
And Francis Weller does a lot of work in this space. And the word that he used that really changed the game for me was alchemy or alchemize,
Mm.
right? The concept that by accessing our grief changes us. Like you said, Joe, it changes us. We're not meant to be the other person. We're not meant to emerge the other side of it, the same person. So I was curious, Jason, from that standpoint of like, obviously you mentioned sobriety. I totally relate to that as well. Um, but does that concept of like being alchemized, is that something that you identify with? Is that something that seems too far reaching for some of us to believe like we have to go through it to come out the other side? And when we come out the other side, we're not the same substance, right? You take metal, take lead, you turn it into gold kind of thing. Is that how it feels?
100%. And yeah, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, I mean, is a freaking great book. But I think of it like, I totally agree with that. And I think of it like a lot of it like that Japanese art of kintsugi. I mean, you break a piece of pottery and then you put it back together with gold. So when it's reassembled, it is different and still beautiful in just a different way. And I think of course any kind of traumatic loss is going to impact you in a profound way, right? How it impacts you is something we have a fair amount of control over, right? Like in the sense that, like I'll give you an example. So I have a TikTok channel, and where I just talk about grief, kind of similar to what we're doing now, actually. And I have had thousands of parents who have lost a child comment and say things like, I lost my kid, I'm permanently broken. Well, the problem is with that is that the words we use don't describe our reality, they define it. And so you got to be really careful about the reality that you're boldly speaking into existence. I understand how it could feel that way, like if you lose a child, um, how you could feel permanently broken. The problem is the more you talk about it, the more true it's going to become. And so I've always, even in the times that have felt the darkest, so actually to give you, I remember actually, so I found out my daughter died. It was like 7, I was up at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I was walking the dog. They came in. My wife called, "You got to come home right now." Came home. He sat me down, and all I remember is, you know, uh, devastating news. Blah blah blah. Chloe didn't make it, and it was like being hit with a taser, like in the sense of like the complete nervous system overwhelm and everything. But I was in my living room just out here, and I was like fell on my knees, and I was just saying, oh God," over and over again. But I remember having this thought, like literally 2 minutes after, um, or less than 2 minutes after I found out she died. I was on my hands and knees, and this thought popped into my head that I don't know how and I don't know when, but this is going to make me a better fucking person than I am right now. And I knew that because my sort of language, I'm doing my best. I have a potty mouth. Because I knew that already happened with my wife, right? And so I have always held on to that, like, and believe that because um, one of the abilities that is inherent in our humanity that no one can take away from us, but we too way too frequently give away, is the power to choose how we look at things, how we looked at what happened to us, what's happening to us, and like what we'd love to happen to us in the future. And I just have always known and always believed to my core, again, because I had the experience with my wife, um, that my daughter's death would make me a better person. And so that optimism and belief, I mean, it's hard to put into words how powerful it is, to have like a sort of a North Star to aim at. That's like, this is going to, like, in order for me to make meaning for my wife and daughter's lives and death, I need to grow as a person in order to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I just always held on to that. So there was again, another long answer. So yeah, the idea of alchemy and, transforming, uh, based on tragedy, I think is a really powerful way to look at it. And it's totally possible. Not easy, but it's very possible.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It is interesting. I mean, some of this is because I'm learning too. I like these discussions. It's part of these discussions. And one of the movements we're doing now is the I Am Day movement. I don't know if you've seen that, probably not, but it is about speaking your reality, because the words you say and the words you utter, and they define who you are and what your day is going to be like. And
Totally.
um, people don't pay enough attention to the things you say every day are literally creating the reality that you live.
Yeah.
And it's not just the spoken word; it's the thoughts in your head too, and that speech matters. And I've learned that the hard way. This the thing about grief and mourning. One of the guests said something about mourning. Said that you did grieve; it's the mourning that didn't happen. But whichever it is, I had the same thing. It's like I said, I came home. It was months before I sat down, or weeks, months, I don't remember. And I realized that I hadn't done that.
Mm.
And I would have these episodes like you did during the day where I would come apart for no reason. I'd have to walk away from a conversation. I'd have to walk away from something. And I realized I hadn't let all those emotions out. And, I didn't drink. I don't drink much. I drink about twice a year. But mine was I couldn't speak anything emotionally to anyone without tearing up and breaking down, because all those emotions were trying to come out. And that's my experience.
Hey, can I pause you there? Because
Yeah.
you just said something I think is so common and is really connects to what we were literally, like what we're just talking about. You just described the process of having a normal human reaction to grief as both coming apart and breaking down, right? And that's the kind of language that guys use that drives me freaking crazy. I used to use it all the time. But because who wants to break down? Like, you're going to breaking, if the paradigm about, crying or having a normal human experience is breaking down, we're going to try to avoid things that make us feel like we're breaking down. And all the ways we try to avoid it they just make it a million times worse. So anyways, I just noticed that while you were talking.
No, I love that. I mean, that's one of the things I really hit on in my, I'm very particular, and I like being called out about words and titles and everything. And we've had this discussion. You haven't been on any of these, and I don't think you've watched any. Words have power, and I try to be very careful about the words I use, because a lot of words have negative connotations. A lot of words have a positive connotation. And you're right. When a man says he's breaking, that's a negative connotation. But one of the things you wrote, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think I got this right, is that I think I need to learn how to cry better. And that's fantastic. And I don't know that there are many men that can't learn that don't need to learn that. I know that I certainly needed to learn how to do that, because a cry for me was sit down for 10 minutes, let it out. And like you said, I guess I would explain it this way. We're under the assumption that grief and mourning have a start and a stop point. And somebody asked me not too long ago, because I talked about my father, and we were on a live one day, and I broke down talking about my father, and he said, how long you think you're going to mourn my father? And I said, as long as I'm going to love my father, which will be forever. And I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to mourn my father for the rest of my life. That doesn't mean I have to, like you say, it's not a negative thing. I loved my father dearly, and I'm allowed to grieve and mourn for him. And so I'll ask you that. And I think I need to learn how to cry better. What does better mean to you?
Yeah. I just want to touch on something you said that I think is important is just like you'll always be a grieving son. I will always be a grieving father, grieving husband. What that looks like will change over time, right? But I mean, obviously, there's no endpoint. So when I say learn to cry better, I mean, where I was at in that moment was, so I'll give you an example. So as much as I realize now that I need to, face my emotions and sit with the experiences that come up, it's still really hard. So, like, let's say, for example, this happened to me a couple weeks ago, where I was sitting actually on this couch, and I was talking to my wife, and all of a sudden I felt like this, like out of the blue, like this really intense pressure building in my body, and I felt super uncomfortable, and I recognized it for that it was a wave of grief, and I just started to feel really sad, and I just stopped talking, and my wife said, what's going on? Like, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm really missing Chloe right now. And I just started to cry. And I went downstairs and I grabbed her urn, because I still haven't figured out what to do with the remains. So her urn's just sitting on my desk. But I picked it up and I brought it over the couch and I clutched it to my chest and I just bawled my head off. But it's really hard for me to just have that experience without self-judgment, because the thoughts that go through my head are, I could not protect my family in this state I'm in right now. I'm basically on my knees. I feel like it feels pathetic, and I feel like I'm unable to fulfill the primary role that I'm, like, as a man supposed to, like. So I have not figured out a way to, turn those thoughts off yet. But I don't let them dictate my behavior, right? Like, so what I would have done before was I would have drank my way or smoked dope, smoked my way to make the thing go away so I didn't have to deal with it. Now, those thoughts are present. They're not pleasant, but I don't let them impact, you know, my ability to like just sit there and cry. Or, sometimes like when I wrote that piece, I was like sobbing I was in the bathtub, and I just kept thinking about like how weird my facial expressions must look, and like so it's just sort of like all this self judgment, and so I mean, when I said like I need to learn to cry better, that was basically the reason. Is like I would like to maybe one day get to a point where, you know, like sobbing like that doesn't trigger like these just almost automatic thoughts of like questioning my own manhood. You know what I mean? Like so
No, yeah,
maybe one day
absolutely.
but I think what's the most important thing is I do not let those thoughts. I observe them, but I don't let them dictate my behavior anymore.
Awesome. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I love the way you said that, Jason. You observe them because one of the things that I encountered over the years of kind of to your point, sitting in the grief in the morning is the witnessing of it.
Mm,
And sometimes that can actually be the most powerful thing is to be the witness for someone else in their
mhm,
grief. But then one thing I remember saying to myself, and I'm sure you feel this as well, is then there's this obligation, right, to allow yourself to be witnessed, right, to
mhm,
allow the same space and grace. And I remember an exercise I did years ago with my therapist, who has since passed. I miss him every day. But he kind of had me practice this thing where you almost, and it's going to seem a little metaphysical, Joe, so stick with me. You almost pop out of your body, right?
mhm,
And you imagine yourself in another position looking at yourself, right? So if you're in this state of grief, you kind of just take another perspective as if you were looking at yourself, but it doesn't end there. You then take a third perspective and you pop out from that person. And so if you imagine it, it's almost like the third person can't see the first person, but they can see
mhm,
the second person witnessing the first person. And
mhm,
what you witness in that very metaphysical experience is you can tell there's somebody who's witnessing a person in anguish. And as a
mm,
result, your empathy is dialed up, right? You're thinking, hey, somebody's in pain and I want to help that person. And just that sort of separation, 1 degree, 2 degree, allowed me to afford myself that witnessing. And now I try and do it. Like you can do this in public places, meaning like if you're sitting somewhere on a park bench and you see someone who's you can tell is maybe going through something, right? You can just sort of say to yourself the intention, like, I wish them peace,
mhm,
right? I extend whatever sense of calm and gratitude I have in this moment, and I give it to them. And I'm curious, Jason, for you. I mean, this must be to your point around the the sort of gripping that we have to do. And Joe, you and I talked about this before. Like this, we're not allowed to just like let be. We're not allowed to
mm,
just let the tears come. And even in the sense of like being a better crier, where do we do that? Well, I can tell you where I do that. I make sure I go see a movie
mm,
every once in a while that I know is going to gut me, right?
yeah.
But it's like I'm pre-scheduling it. I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, once every 2 months, I better make sure to go to that movie that's going to cause me to cry like the Nile. I need more than that.
Felt that about like every Star Wars prequel, but that wasn't grief related. I was just like, what have you done to my childhood freaking memories? Yeah, no, I love that. I love that idea. That's I'd never heard that exercise before, but that sounds pretty powerful. I mean, I do think that I think that I just become such a huge believer in the idea that in the healing power of empathy and how like just how much the world if the world needs anything right now, it's just more empathy. And I think it's hard for people because so I learned this idea um in a training program a few years ago, and it's so basically the way the instructor described it was two concepts. It was like fusion and self differentiation. So fusion is like my emotional condition is dictated by your emotional condition. So let's say Bill, you're grieving, and you and I are buddies. and I hang out with you and you're just devastated, and that wrecks my, you know, like I wrecks my day or whatever. And self differentiation is I can deeply empathize with your emotional condition or your situation without letting it like take over my own. And I think that's like for like my daughter who like is a really empathic person. I mean, that's really hard for her to do. She really wears everybody else's emotions on her sleeve. But I think that the self differentiation piece is like if you want to support someone you love who's grieving, you have to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're either going to avoid trying to be with them in their pain because it's going to wreck yours, or you will be with them in your pain and it'll wreck your day. So I think that's a real skill. Is like the man. I can just imagine how awful that must be for you, and I can, man. But like the moment I take it on, is the moment I become less able to be supportive to you in the way that you need. So I think people we just don't learn these. The older I get, the more unbelievable I find it, like some of the things we don't learn, like in, like how to communicate with one another, for example. But empathy is one of those things, because most people, I think, when one of the things that anybody who's lost someone important to them learns about grief is that nobody knows how to comfort. Like just like I didn't know how to grieve, very few people know how to support someone who is grieving, and so and a lot of times what they will do is they just don't say anything. Yeah, I've had people in my life, like literally my brother has not said a word to me. He's a little on the emotionally stunted side, I would say. He's other than bringing some pizzas over like the day after my daughter died, he literally has not said a word to me in 2.5 years about it. And um and so uh part of being able to heal, I think, is accepting people for where they are at. So like I don't have any resentment for anybody for how they have showed up or not showed up. Everybody's doing their best, man. And if they could be doing better, they would. And I'm just at peace with they're doing their best. Um, Otherwise, it would be very easy to become bitter and angry and all that. But I think the other thing mm, is that I think if the more we learn to be able to sit with the people we love who are hurting, to try to see their experience through their eyes and not try to fix them, not try to solve their problem, not try to give them advice. The better off we'll be. One of the businesses I own is a coaching program for dads. And we coach dads who own businesses, and we teach them skills on how to be a better husband, father, and business owner. And the very first thing we teach them, when anyone that comes in the group, is emotional validation. How to understand, accept, and acknowledge somebody else's emotional experience without trying to fix them, without trying to give advice, without any of that. It's just, man, that sounds really freaking hard. And then just shut the hell up and listen.
Um, yeah, I think that one of the things you're right, men, especially men, don't know how to support another man that's grieving.
Mm.
Um, and again, I think that's something that's passed down. It's societal. Um, we don't learn that. I
Mhm.
mean, we learn empathy, but it's and it is aggravating because it's especially when you're going through it. eh, I can't coach another person how to do it while I'm grieving.
Mm.
And sometimes it's just sitting there, just sit here and be next to me.
Yeah.
And I don't need you to come over and fist pound me and say it'll be all right, dude. And um, I don't need the platitudes. Just sit down and let's just be for a few minutes. But one of the things I write a lot about grief. It's not as much lately as I did it as when the things first happened and they were fresh in my mind. But one of my posts was, um, to raise or lower your eyes until you meet grief head on. And um, I got the quote here somewhere, but mm, that to me, let's step out of the macho or how do you say it, machismo, whatever, and just say, what takes more courage, to run from that grief or to turn around and face that grief and say, okay, I can't beat you, but I can take what you're going to give me, and
Mhm.
let's go through this process, and let's do what we got to do, because I can, you know, grief to me is a form of love, and by grieving, I am and mourning, I am demonstrating in a physical and mental way how much I love that person.
Mhm.
And why would I deny them that? And why would I deny myself that? Because, that's I think that's important. I learn a lot in these, and it's one of the reasons I love having these roundtables, Jason, is because every one of them I learn something, and I write notes, and I go back and I digest it. And I think that's, even at our age, we're learning every day, and
Oh,
and
yeah, for sure.
and we got to get away from this narrative that we're 50, we're 60, we know the world, we know everything, we got it all figured out, because that's the day life walks up behind you and punch you right in the ass and said, "You want to bet? Um, you hadn't handled this yet." And I've got like 50 questions, but we're never going to get to them. But one of the
Hey
things you
Joe,
said,
one thing
yeah,
I did want to just say really quickly, when you talked about the grief piece, I remember something somebody told me that was super helpful years ago. They said grief is love with nowhere to go.
Mhm. Heard
And
that too.
that just encapsulated it for me. And I was like, thank you. So it's an expression of love.
Totally.
yeah. Um, you wrote in one of yours about warning men not to outwork grief. If I'm rephrasing these wrong or whatever, feel
Yeah.
free to correct me. Um, and that's true. I think a lot of men do that. They try to take their grief and their pain and they stuff it into something else.
Mhm.
And it's like I said, some do it in drink, some do it in drugs, some do it in their work. They go right back to work and they say, well, I'll work. And they work
Totally.
12, 15. So they don't have to deal with the crap. Um, I'd ask you, because you've got what's the name of, isn't it Man Down? That's the name of
The
your blog.
the Substack is man down.
But you got some downloadables too, right?
Mhm.
Um, what would you say? What should a person do in the first 72 hours, and what should they stop doing? Um,
Oh, man. I mean, I think it depends on the scope of the loss. Like, I mean, for me, I didn't do anything. Like, I mean, basically, I just cried and, contacted people. And I mean, I think so. I think I'm going to answer your question, but in a maybe an indirect way. I think that one of the things that we don't teach people is that I'm a huge, like really interested in, and have been teaching people for years, is like the skills help you become more resilient. And the problem is that when something terrible happens, like you suffer a tragic loss or whatever, that is not the time you're going to learn how to do that. Like it's like you just there's no way you have the capacity. So I really encourage people, like, just to learn the skills of resilience, because life, part of the human condition is facing like challenges that seem insurmountable, devastating loss. That's just part of being human, right? And so I always encourage people to, and that's what my wife's death and the whole journey that sent me down, the path that sent my life down, helped me become way more resilient after my daughter died. Doesn't mean it hasn't been absolutely brutal, and the most painful thing in my, painful experience in my life. But, uh, but I've also been very intentional and mostly successful, but not doing things to make it even worse than it already is. So, I mean, I think in the first 72 hours, it's really just I don't even, honestly, don't destroy yourself. That's the best thing. Honest to God, that's the best thing I could say. Like, I think I don't even remember the first week, to be honest with you. Like, literally, I don't even, I remember, like, of my daughter's, I don't know, hour and a half memorial with service. I think I remember like maybe 3 minutes of it. Like totally, like it's just a blank. So I don't know that I have a good answer other than to say, be aware that anything that you do to distract yourself from the pain will only make it worse. That's a guarantee. And so, um, yeah, not any magical words of wisdom there, but and also just recognize. Maybe it's also just recognizing that if you suffer a devastating loss, um, you are not going to be able to function. Like, getting out of bed, putting a pair of socks on is going to feel like a miracle. And so maybe it's just to be compassionate with yourself, and yeah, try not to make it worse.
Yeah, it's almost a contradiction that in the time of our life when we're most counted on to be detailed and taking care of affairs and doing that, it's the time we're least capable of it.
Mhm.
And it's almost, especially there's such a hurry to get through the process, especially in our culture. That it's the day it happens, we got to from the moment you find out you're making plans on how to bury, how to take care of them, how to you know, and then in a parent situation, then you're what to do with the house, what to do with all the stuff, what to do with
Mhm.
this, and you're constantly inundated that from the moment you find out they're dead,
Yep.
and you've got maybe that short little window, a few hours where you get to grieve, and then okay, now we're back to business again,
Mhm.
and at that time, I wish I would have just told everybody, say, you know what, get the hell out of my house
Mhm.
for 3 days, 4 days, and I'll tell you when I'm ready to handle business. I'm not going to let you guys dictate what we need to do because, as bad as it sounds, he's gone now. And we're the ones here that have to deal with the aftermath.
Mhm.
So let me take care of my family and my mother and myself. And then we'll take care of the legal stuff. And then we'll take care of all the affairs. And um, that working yourself through it, I think that's another way we did it was I stuffed all that down and said, I got to take care of my daughters. I got to take care of my mother. I got to take care of affairs. I got to take care of, what, all this other stuff. And that allowed me to, like you said, box all that grief up and say,
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with that right now because I've got important things to do. And um, I think the thing people don't say about it is the harder you store it away and the more you try to box it up, the bigger and the uglier it gets. And when it finally comes out, it gets harder to deal with. Because then there's the added, and nobody ever talks about this. I think then there's the added component of guilt because you didn't grieve properly and you didn't do the things at the time you should have done. Um, so since we're running tight, there's one, and you talked about this in the beginning. If you
Well,
add one, but
can I
yeah, go ahead.
just make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
I think I love everything you said, and I also think that when you don't grieve and you try to bury it, um, you have to. The only way that you can do that is by doing things like using things to distract yourself, like using coping mechanisms. And the problem with that is that so you have the devastating loss of the person. You might have guilt. So you might have guilt over, especially as your parent loses a child. You think I couldn't save my own child. Like there's a whole process there. Like you look back on all these things that seemed like mundane or insignificant, and then their kid dies, and then you realize how significant they were, and so there's all this like guilt and feeling of failure that you have to process as well. Then you start coping. Then you don't want to deal with it, and you start coping. Problem is when you start coping, that chips away at your moral foundation, because when you start coping, what people do, so drinking, watching porn, like whatever, you lie about it, right? Because you're ashamed of doing it. And so you try to hide it, maybe like stuff that any addict does. Like it's just another version of addiction, because addiction, there's always pain behind addiction, right? And so you start engaging in these behaviors that are chipping away at your moral foundation and how you see yourself as a person. So not only do you have like the tremendous sadness of the loss, and now you have like, and you might have guilt. Now you have like guilt and shame about how you are showing up as a human, and maybe how you're showing up as a husband or a father to the other kid. And it just, man, it is a downward. It can be a rapid downward spiral.
Absolutely.
Said the man who's experienced it.
Go ahead, Bill. I'll give you one before I.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Jason. You know, I remember when I realized that shame is the slow killer of men. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, but I think it's worth stating that and naming that. But I don't want to end on that sad part. I'd love to ask a question around some of the glimmer, is what I call. You know, in your world, obviously having lost a child and a wife, and, you know, some of the things I think about grief and mourning is sometimes there are these gifts. And one of the things I encountered was sometimes you get like some things, like you'll see things, or there'll be little reminders in life, or a sense of smell, like somebody walks by that used to wear the perfume of your first wife, and it just brings you instantly back into those memories. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit maybe about some of those sensations, right? Those things that we have at our command, right? The five senses that allow us to revisit those core memories, but also honor, right? To be the opposite of shame, it's the honor and the memory. Any thoughts on that?
Well, what I would say, I'm not sure if this is a direct answer to the question, but what came to mind for me is, so one of the things that I've been doing is somatic experience in therapy. So I've done like talk therapy, and I got to the point where uh, maybe a few months after, maybe 6 months after my daughter died or something, I got really resistant to the idea of talk therapy. It's just because I'm like, I don't need to analyze this anymore. Like I get it, you know, but I also knew I needed to heal. So serendipitously, I guess I came across a podcast that was talking about somatic experiencing therapy, and I started to do that. And it's been life changing. And really, all it is, you know, method of connecting to the experiences happening in your body without judgment or, you know, storytelling about what that all means. And I think that it has allowed me to so much more deeply understand the experience of grief in my body, because like typically what happens is, okay, you have like this horribly uncomfortable feeling, like when a wave of, let's say, okay, I'll walk by a picture of my daughter, let's say, 9 times out of 10, I can look at it, it's fine. The 10th time, it just like overwhelms me with grief. So what happens is something first I experience that in my body. Then I tell myself a story about what that sensation means, and then I engage in a behavioral response based on the story I tell myself. Somatic experiencing is like, just forget those last two pieces and just like connect to what's happening in your freaking body. And it is like, it's really hard to do. It sounds so simple, and when you're in the thick of it, it is so hard to get out of your freaking head. And there's lots of times I'm just like, screw that. I'm not doing that right now. And every time I have a therapy session tomorrow, I hate every one of them. Like I hate, like I'm thinking about it right now. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. But it's always like super valuable, and I'm happy I did it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm really answering your question, Bill, but I just think we are so conditioned, like in Western society, to live in our heads, and we are so disconnected from our bodies. And I was the prime example of that. And it has been immensely powerful and healing for me to be able to sit with. So if I have I smell something or see a picture or like think back to a memory, it's to think like, what does that feel like in my body? You know, what does loving Chloe feel like in my body? And it's such a powerful exercise to go through, both to connect to the good memories and feelings, but also to really quickly allow the more challenging ones to move through you.
Totally. Thank you. That's really helpful. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
I like the therapy thing because I'll tell you about I looked for years. I talked to several people throughout my life, but I finally met one, and I told her one day. She was asking questions. I said, "I hate you so much. I hate you right now so much."
I told my therapist this like literally in our last session. God, I hate your guts, man.
Yeah, I hate you. How can I schedule another session?
Yeah,
Because this is what I need right here. I need you to kick my ass a little bit, but I
yeah.
do not like you right now. I want you to know that. Um, and I'll ask this question and I'll answer it. What is one belief about masculinity that you wish you could uninstall from every 12-year-old boy? Um, and I would answer that. One is that crying is feminine and anger is masculine.
Mm.
And that's a tough one to get around because that is not only, I think, installed by our parents, but society as a whole, right? That crying is a feminine thing.
Mhm.
And that I never feel better. And I'm like you, there are times I hide things, but I'll go stand in the shower and bawl my eyes out because when I come out, nobody's aware that that's what they think I just took a long shower.
Safest place.
Yeah, but it feels, it's like, man, you come out like a new guy
Mhm.
almost because you released all that stuff. And the other part of it is, I truly believe that anger is just another facet of fear. And every time we get angry,
Mhm.
it's because we fear those feelings, and it's because we don't know the proper way to get those feelings out, and
Mhm.
so we let them out with rage or um, like you said, one of yours, it was madness, overwhelming rage, and or overwhelming darkness. I think it was you said,
Mhm.
or rage, and
Yeah.
and that's how we express it. Um, and again, I don't like labels, so I try to go away from positive and negative. But it's not good to go punching holes in the wall. I know you're grieving, but that's you know, you're you're running from something. And I've done it. I'm not pointing fingers. I've done it.
Mm.
So I would
Yeah,
ask you,
yeah. Well, I think that's a great segue because I think what I would, if I could, ins, you know, implant this in every 12-year-old boy, it's that there are no right or wrong or good or bad emotions. They are just emotions, and they are part of what makes us human. And as much as you might like to try to pretend otherwise, we all experience all of them. So, because I think, like, to your point, anger is almost always a secondary emotion.
mm,
It's like, somebody feels fear, insecurity, frustration. For guys, it comes out as anger, typically, right? Because, like, a guy will just say, "Oh my God, I'm so freaking pissed off at that," rather than saying, "You know what? I'm feeling insecure right now because I've tried to do this thing 3 times and I promised my whoever I was going to do it and I can't get it to work. And it's like, it's causing me to feel insecure and frustrated." Like, that's what an emotionally intelligent person would say. A less emotionally intelligent person would say, "Oh, I'm so freaking pissed." So I think that, yeah, just teaching boys that we all experience all the emotions and they're fine and they're just part of what makes us human, and we are allowed to sit with them and not have to react to them. And maybe one other thing I would say, because it's something I learned from my dad, I want to who I love very much, but I want to disabuse people of this is like, logic is not better than emotion. That's not even a paradigm worth. It's like saying yellow is better than the ocean. Like, that, it doesn't
amen
even
and
make sense.
hallelujah.
You know what I mean? Like, so, um, yeah,
Yeah,
or,
absolutely.
yeah,
I hate that. I hate that argument where somebody they jump into an argument and you're being emotional about it and I'm being logical about it.
yeah,
No, you're not, because
yeah,
our emotion is a component of everything that we do.
yes,
And you may think you're being logical, and you may think you're a robot, but you're not. It's everything we're dealing with now in society is based around that fear. and that anxiety about what's going on, because 99.999% of us have never been affected by any of it. So, but we're reacting out of fear. So I think that's a good one. You got anything, Bill?
Thank you for the therapy hour. This was incredible, man. I appreciate you,
Yeah.
both of you.
We started a few minutes late, so I'm gonna give you the last one, and then we'll take off, because this is a short one. If you had a billboard for men that stayed up for one day, what would it say?
Be kind. That's it.
There you go. That's it. Wasn't as tough as I thought. So, well, Jason, I can't tell you enough, man. I love your site, and
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and I applaud that you do it. And we need more men like you in the world. We really do. And I'm not saying that because you're here, and I'm not saying that because I'm talking to you. I'm saying it because I found the site, and I read it, and I think more of us need to take these types of emotions and turn them into stuff like you do, a positive outcome, and put it out in the world. Because the more of us that stand there and say things like this, the more the next generation turns out okay. And the more the next generation turns out, and they don't have to stumble through these things like we did, right? So,
yeah, and one last thing I say on that is that I agree. I read a book a little while ago, shortly after my daughter died, called "The Sixth Stage of Grief: Making Meaning." It's all about finding a sense of purpose and all that. And I think that what I'm doing and what you're doing, what I think one of the most healing things we can do is find a sense of purpose, or a way to make meaning from the lives and deaths of the person or people that we lost, that we love dearly. And so when I do this work, like when I do, write or whatever, that's always in my mind. This is a way of honoring my wife and daughter's memories and my love for them. And it's very, very healing. Helping people helps you. I mean, just as much, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I wrote mine, and I said this last week, and not to keep everybody here, but I wrote a post about the night I almost killed myself, and I said last week, and I mean this: if me being, I don't think it's brave. If me saying these words saves one more person, or causes one person to pause, or makes a difference in one person's life, then every minute I have spent writing for my entirety of my life has been worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that it does. I hope that these things help people to sit down and think about, we're surrounded by so much negativity and so much anger in the world now that, one of the facets of this is I want to put some kindness out there, some genuine, honest kindness, and say, hey guys, this does exist out here, and we're just quieter. So I appreciate you coming on. I know it was a little disorganized, but I do appreciate your time, and
I take full responsibility for that.
And I ask everybody on mine, if you hadn't checked out Jason, go check out Jason's stuff, because it is. I mean, it's brilliant, and I wish you the best, and I'll keep reading if you keep writing, man.
All right, guys. Well, hey, it was so nice to meet you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you guys are doing here. It's really nice to be a part of it.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, guys. Take care.
All right, bye, guys.